Okay, welcome to its class 11 of Journey to the Selfless Self. And it's really the final class of the second section of this series, which is called Being Jewish. The first 5 classes were called Being Human. Then we had a review. And then this is the final one of these 5 classes. This is called Being Jewish. And then we'll have a review. It's entitled The Baal Shem Tov and the Final Revelation. So the question really is that we're going to brainstorm this for a couple of minutes. What is Hasidus? What was it that the Baal Shem Tov, everyone knows that the Baal Shem Tov, yeah? What was it that he brought to the world? Was it something really, what was it? When we say, what does it mean, Hasidus, what springs to mind? Whatever you say, whether it's like, white socks or whatever it is. Can we brainstorm this a little bit?
I was actually just listening to a class by Rabbi Shais Taub.
Wow.
So he said Hasidus is getting to the essence of something.
Okay, so we're finished. Done.
Okay.
That really is what we're going to describe Hasidus as, essence. But Kolzman, we speak about, hi, welcome. We're just asking the question, what does it mean, Hasidus? So I actually typed into the chat bot, what would you give me? What would be the kind of things you would expect to hear if you were to ask Jews, what does it mean, Hasidus? So you just cut to the chase completely, but the kinds of things that people would that to the side, what other things would you say? What could you imagine people saying is Hasidus?
A more spiritual approach.
Yeah, absolutely. An emphasis on simcha, an emphasis on prayer, minhagim, the idea of the tzaddik, a deeper connection to the tzaddikim, learning like deeper, more kind of mystical elements of the Torah, investing more energy into the mitzvahs, more energy into the preparation for the mitzvahs. There's also the idea of the Baal Shem Tov, kind of one of the things that he came to kind of remedy, so to speak, was Yiddishkeit had become very kind of elitist in the 1700s, the early 1700s, late 1600s. It felt like Yiddishkeit had become kind of like the reserve of the, I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, the reserve of, either way, that it was shaykh only to the big Talmidei Chachamim and whatever, but the Hamon the general people, it felt like they didn't really have much of a connection, and they didn't know much, and what was there, what was it really worth? So the Baal Shem Tov, one of the things he did was he came to show that Yiddishkeit is shaykh to every single Jew, and it's not shaykh more to Rav Eliashiv Zatzal than it is to you and me, or even to Moshe Rabbeinu than it is to you and me. Yiddishkeit is available to all of us, every single Jew. That was another thing the Baal Shem Tov came to tell us. And the most basic, well, what is it? What's the basic idea when we talk about in the Gemara of the Chassid? Anyone knows what the most simple, if you were to ask like, somebody who learns Mesilas Yesharim or a straight yeshivish guy, what does it really mean, a Chassid, the way the Gemara tells us?
Thank
you, perfect. Which means, well, they translate it as going beyond the letter of the law, yeah? But really, it doesn't translate like that at all. Lifnim Mishuras Din, how would you translate that accurately? It's not like going beyond, it's going within. Lifnim, within the line of the law, not outside the line of the law, like going beyond the letter of the law is how they translate it. But Lifnim Mishuras Din, we translate as going inside the law, yeah? So it's Abramov, yeah? Mrs. Abramov, she nailed it. What is Hasidus? And we could call it one essence. The Lubavitcher Rebbe called it Yechida, which is, for us, it's not that helpful because we don't really know what that means, but we could call it essence. And that also isn't very helpful, but we're going to unpack that B'ezrat Hashem and work out what that means. But let me just tell you something quickly. The idea of gravity, if you go online and type in what is gravity, you'll see it will immediately start saying, well, gravity is like masses pulling things toward each other, or the warping of space-time, whatever. The point is, you will be told lots of ways of how gravity expresses itself, but you will not get told what gravity is, because no one really knows what gravity is. And that's why it was that Einstein came along, 100 years ago, and completely flipped it on his head what Newton had said. Newton, whatever, we're not going to get into the details, not that I really understand them, but Newton described gravity as X, and Einstein said that's good and it's true to a certain level, but really it's Y. So according to Newton's understanding of gravity, you could put a man on the moon, but you wouldn't be able to have GPS systems according to Newton's gravity. You would need to go to Einsteinian rules of the understanding of gravity to be able to have things like GPSs. Whereas Newton was able to, with his understanding of gravity, could put man on the moon. Why am I talking about this? Because Einstein came along and completely said, no. What you said was really good, but it's not like that at all. It's a completely different thing. How can he have said that? It's because no one really knows what gravity actually is. We just know what it does, or how it looks, how it expresses itself. And that's really the inyan of Hasidus. To call Hasidus essence is great, but it's not really very helpful. But once we go through all the different ways that Hasidus expresses itself, we will see, B'ezrat Hashem, what that really means. So we're going to see, just like we see gravity express itself all over the place. You look at the car, there's gravity working. The fact that all your internal organs aren't jiggling around and doing funny stuff, that's gravity as well. Yeah, the fact that the sun is where it is, that's gravity. The fact that you can lean on your table, that's gravity. You see gravity everywhere. Yeah, but you never really know what it is. But if you keep looking at all the different ways it expresses itself, then you will actually come to a kind of abstract conceptual understanding of it, okay? So Hasidus, like we said, is essence. We could even say a little bit more. We could say it's like identification with essence and disidentification from name, which is not essence. Now, just to go back to class, I can't remember which class, maybe class 3 or 4 or something. I'm not sure. Remember we spoke about the difference between name and essence? Does anyone remember the image that we gave that helps us understand it clearly?
Yeah, the eye.
Perfect. So the eye is the most beautiful diagram to understand clearly the concept of essence and name. Okay, etzem and shem, essence and name. The essence is the person. The shame is everything about the person. That's the expression. That's how the person expresses themselves. So the name can be all kinds of, part of your name would be your personality, would be your physiological matzav, would be your house and your car, your kids, your clothes, your emotions, etc. All your intellect, all of these things are expressions of who you are. You have all of them. You have intellect, you have emotions, you have a house, you have a husband, you have a name, but you're not your name. The you is the one who has. Everyone's with me? We discussed this at length. Yeah, everyone's familiar with the ideas? Yeah? I can't see Mrs. Silburn Mrs. Rocha, whatever. You familiar with what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So Hasidus is really the identification with, see, to say that part of yourself is incorrect. It's not a part of yourself. It's you. So you're not relating to a part of yourself. Anything to do with your name, yeah, that's relating to something that you have, a part of you. Hasidus isn't about relating to a part of you. It's about being you, mamash. And one of the ways we do that is getting very clear on disidentifying with all the stuff about us. Like, that doesn't mean that you become this, this homogenous robot. We've said that many times. It means that it's just not you. I have my money. I have my house. I have my family. And I can be intimately bound up with that stuff. That's fine. But just remember, that's stuff that you have. That's not the you. Hasidus is getting back to the you. And even deeper than that, and I don't know if it's two separate things, it's getting to Hashem as his essence, not relating to anything that he has or anything that he does or anything that he creates, but relating to him himself, mamash. Just like there's the you, and a person could lose, chas v'shalom, they could lose everything, literally. They could even lose their mind, and they'd still be them. That's that essential point that's unchanging. It's the same as when you were 5 as it is when you're right now, and as you will be when you're 80. You might not be able to talk the same way or laugh the same way, but it's the same. It's the same. Everything that happens to you as you get older is just the name changes, but it's just the essence expresses itself more and more. Have you ever noticed when you look into your baby's eyes that the eyes are like, the first few weeks, they're like kind of like a funny kind of graphite color, and then they kind of normalize and they become their eyes. It might change the color a little bit, yeah, later on. But have you noticed that the child's eyes are the same size as your eyes? You ever notice that? That their sockets are much smaller. So the pupil like fits, so there it's just like the pupils, but the eyes are the same size. You know what I'm talking about? Their eyes are literally, from when they're born, their eyes are the same size as our eyes. Just the sockets get bigger, so you see more white. But when they're very small, basically their whole eye socket is just filled with the pupil and the iris. Yeah? That's the opposite of the ears. If you notice, it's a funny thing to say. If you notice, old people have got bigger ears. You notice such a thing? Yeah? Because your ears grow your whole life. Yeah? Which is an interesting idea, because listening, hearing is more attached in a sense to the growth of the person, the understanding, whereas the eye is what you see. Like, a kid sees the same thing as what you see and experiences it in the same way. That's a side point. Anyway, so now the whole thing is really expressed in the Baal Shem Tov's name. Baal Shem Tov. We've just discussed what name means. Do you guys remember how we translate the word Tov? Don't say good. Do you remember, we'll go back right to the beginning, what we discussed? What's the definition of good?
The intention behind it, something?
Yeah, but what's the intention? A person who's good is
Selfless.
selfless. And we could translate that, and remember, that doesn't mean I know, Mrs. Silver, you don't like that because of all the things about, but we'll go with it because it doesn't mean losing your individuality in any way whatsoever, and it doesn't mean becoming a doormat in any way whatsoever. But there's a better word that we can translate selfless as, and the word's transparent. That's a really helpful translation for the word Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov, Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, his name was transparent to him. You hear that? You understand the profundity of that idea? Meaning, like, see, when we look at all the stuff that we have, how much does our essence shine through? It will be to varying degrees. It depends. It depends how, what's the word? Not alternative. Our motives. It depends how ulterior our motives are. The more ulterior our motives are, the more our name conceals our essence. The more pure our motives are, the more our name reveals our essence. So really, if you want to go really deep and understand it on the most profound level, Chassidus is getting to Lishma. That's what Chassidus is. Now we need to define what it means, Lishma. But that's really what Chassidus is. Did you guys look at my website, the B'nai Aliyah website?
Yeah.
The catchphrase is it. The name of the organization is B'nai Aliyah, and underneath it says helping Yidden serve Hashem Lishma. That's really, and the word B'nai Aliyah is really what we're talking about. When we're talking about Chassidus, we are not talking about what we call Chassidim in this generation, Bichlal. Klal or klal, mamash. Maybe there are some Chassidim who are Chassidim, but it's not about the beard, it's not about the pears, nothing about the shtreimel, it's not about watching the Rebbe eat chicken soup, it's not about the socks, it's not about minhagim, it's not about the community, it's not about the v'chule v'chule. It's really nothing to do with that. In fact, in many ways, it's punt for carrot the opposite, mamash. When a person becomes caught up in a community and that becomes his identity, he really missed it. That's the opposite of Chassidus. That doesn't mean you can't be a part of a community and really strong with the community, but the minute you define yourself by the community, and that's a real danger of the big Chassidus or any Chassidus in this generation, that is not Chassidus.
Yeah.
Chassidus is the identification with the essence. And you can't really talk about that. And the funny thing is, once you identify with your essence, because your essence is the same as everybody else's essence, you're like one with everyone. That's like on a Friday night. I've said this to you before. You should go if you bench your children, yeah, look deeply into their eyes. Make them look into your eyes. Spend that 15 seconds, however it takes to say the bracha, and gaze deeply into their eyes. And the black of their eye is their essence. And you will see your reflection in the black of their eye. You will see yourself in the black of their eye. And that's what essence is. Our essence is all one. Every yid is of the same essence. That's the segula for V'ahavta l'reacha kamoisha, is relating to yourself essentially, not relating to anything about yourself. Because if you start relating to things about yourself, then you'll be able to relate to things about that person. But then there's going to be things about that person that aren't the same, and you won't be able to relate to them. Okay, so the Baal Shem Tov was the man who had perfected the name. His name was Tov. His name was completely transparent to him. In the Gemara, they call that Toicha Kaboiroi. His insides and his outsides were absolutely aligned with one another. I would imagine that if you saw the Baal Shem Tov, you would just start to cry. That's what I would think would happen. you wouldn't turn around to your friends and say, wow, you can't imagine, like, he gets up at this time in the morning and he fasts and this. You would just cry. That's what seeing essence, true essence does. We see it so rarely, but we do see it, and we'll talk about that. Okay. Do anyone remember the definition of gullus, of exile? Definition of exile is a disconnect between essence and expression, meaning that you're not able to express yourself in the way that you need to express yourself. That's called exile. That's gullus. Geula, on the other hand, is when your expression and your essence are aligned with each other completely. That's the ultimate geula. So in this matzav, the Rebbeinu Shlolem is in gullus. It's called gullus Shechina, yeah? Why? Because the world isn't running itself according to Torah and mitzvahs. That's all Hashem wants, Torah and mitzvahs. So Kol Zman, the world is not completely bound up in Torah and mitzvahs. Hashem's not being able to express himself. It's like this world's like his body, so to speak. It's like a person like, you know, with like Alzheimer's or some Parkinson's they don't have shlita over their body. Imagine the frustration when like sometimes I get like a spasm in this finger and I can't move it, yeah, and it's like weird. It's like very, you know, you can't move a limb or like whatever it is. Like I remember my wife telling me when she had an epidural for one of the children, she was like trying to like move her legs to like prove the doctor's wrong, and she just couldn't do it. And she was talking about the frustration with that. You probably know what I'm talking about. So that idea of that disconnect between you and how you express yourself, that's called gullus. And when they're the same, that's called geula. And that's why we say, what do we say at the end of Aleinu? What are the final words of Aleinu from the Navi? V'yoy mahu yeh u'shmo echad. When he and his name is one. That's exactly the inyan that we're talking about. That is Chassidus. Again, I've met a lot of Litvish Yidden who are much more Chassidic than Chassidish Yidden. It's got nothing to do with being called Litvish or Chassidish. Nothing. Literally nothing. And in fact, in many cases, it's the opposite, literally. Okay, so Chassidus is for everyone. Chassidus is, the Baal Shem Tov was like Moshe Rabbeinu is for all the Yidden, the Baal Shem Tov is for all the Yidden as well. It's about expression. It's about being who you are, acting who you are. It's about your name becoming transparent to who you are. Okay, so we've got 5 madrigas of the heart. This is a whole shir in itself. We're going to say it quite quickly. And we should understand it from this really deeply as well, to Shem. Okay, this is worth writing down. We have what's called Timtum Alev, which means the clogged heart or the blocked heart. Then the next madriga is called Shviras Alev, which means the broken heart. Then we have Mariras Alev, which means bitterness of heart. Then we have Psichas Alev, which means openness of heart. Could also call that Simcha. And I'm going to leave the final one out. The final one's called Tuv Levav, goodness of heart. We'll talk about that. That's the point we're trying to get to. Timtum Alev is when you've become identified with Shtuyot. When you've become identified with the things of this world, deeply identified, entrenched. Yeah, have you seen, imagine a guy who's got a car, like a younger guy who's just bought this new car, and like that, it's like his life. Every time you hear it, he's just, all he does is talk about it. If anything happened to it, it would be a tragedy, yeah? That guy's strongly identified with his car. Yeah, that's not Beseda. So that's called Timtum Alev. That's a state where the heart is just not available to emotion. You could call it depression, or you could call it, like they call it, atzvus, whatever you call it. But it causes this identification with things of this world causes a hardening of the heart, so to speak, and it means that you are unavailable emotionally. It blocks the free flow of emotion. Now, if you're strongly identified with something, let's talk about a child. This is a painful thing to speak about, but it helps us understand the idea. It's a very deep idea. It's a very, very Hailig idea. The idea of shvira. What does it mean, brokenheartedness? Brokenheartedness means that an identity that you had just got smashed. And it's really hard to deal with. It's the most unnerving place to be. So, for example, a young child, let's say a 7 or 8 year old child, a 10-year-old child, or a 12, 13-year-old child whose parents get divorced. And it wasn't like crazy friction in the house. They managed to like cover it up quite well. And it wasn't like kind of, they bound up in they're identified with their parents, with their relationship, their mum and dad. And now all of a sudden the unit of mum and dad gets separated. That's called brokenheartedness, or even worse, a young child losing a child losing a parent, chas v'shalom, where their identity was bound up in their parent, and then that parent is taken away. That's called shvira. That's like the most profound example of shvira. A much less profound example of shvira would be a guy who has always thought of himself. I'll give you a good example. Being a photographer, yeah? If you're a top photographer and then someone comes along who's an objectively better photographer than you, that is a shvira. That is a shvira. That breaks your heart. You just identified as being the best photographer, and now there's this other guy who's just better than you. Well, you're not the best photographer anymore. You hear the feeling that could engender. Yeah, anything that you think you're it, and then you see for some reason that you're not it. Yeah, that's called a shvira. Where does that leave you? That leaves you in this place of like no man's land, like you're definitionless. You're without definition. You thought you were a good mother, yeah? And then you did something that was not Beseda. Well, you're not a bad mother because you've been a good mother for the past 20 years, but you can't call yourself a good mother because what you just did was terrible. So what are you? I don't know. That's called shvira. You're nowhere. You're nowhere. It's like when you take a seed, yeah, and you plant it in the ground, and the brown kind of klipa, the brown shell of the seed disintegrates, and now it's free to go. But at that point, it's very, very, very vulnerable indeed. Yeah, that's shvira. When your kids are chutzpahdik to you, or your kids do something that's not beseda, yeah, or they do something out of character that you're very. That's a shvira. I don't know where I thought they were like this, but they're not. You understand? It's a reset. Yeah. Now, at that stage, you're available now to realign yourself with whatever you want, basically. That's like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a time of shvira. So you come out of Yom Kippur, you go straight into your sukkah, and you now become a tzaddik. That's the goal. You've reset your, I'm not what I used to be. I don't know what I am. Quick, let's get into the sukkah and realign ourselves. Merira, bitterness of heart, if we're zoicha to get there. A lot of people with shvira, it becomes too scary and they revert back to timtum alev. The default thing when somebody goes into a shvira is they immediately start to look for the next thing to identify with so they can go back to timtum, which is the default setting of most human beings. But if you're zoicha, yeah, you can get to merira. Merira, bitterness of heart, is a very positive state. Well, it sounds a bit negative. Bitterness of heart is basically the idea of the resolve to change. It's like, okay, I thought I was the best mum in the world. Yeah, that's the timtum. Something happens and I'm definitely not the best mum in the world. Okay, Shvira. Now, I am going to become the best mum in the world. Yeah, not from a guy with dicker point of view, but that kind of like enough. This is I'm not playing around anymore. Let's get back on. Let's get back in the game. Let's get back on the horse. Let's get back on the bicycle. Let's do this. That's Marua Salave. So the lave is alive, but it's a bit painful because you're not it and you want to be it. And you are gonna be it, but right now it's just a recommitment. That's why it's called bitterness of heart. It's like tangy, like a sour kind of feeling in the mouth, like sour sticks. Yeah, that resolve to take it to go forward. And then if you're zoicha, you get to that's called psich salev. The next stage is simcha. Psich salev means the heart is free flowing with emotion, and that is the state necessary to accomplish anything of value. That's called simcha. That's the stages of the heart. But there's a final fifth stage, which is Hasidus, which is called Tuv Levav. Anybody knows a little bit about Dikduk? A little bit? You remember a bit? You probably know more than all the men around your area. So you have the four first ones, which is Timtum Alev, Shvir Salev, Maria Salev, Psich Salev. Yeah. Although it's really two nouns, the way it works is that the lave is the noun and the other noun is kind of described. So basically the other word is working as like an adjective. So it's the Timtum Alev is the blocked, a heart that is blocked. Shvir Salev is a heart that is broken. Maria Salev is a heart that is bitter. Psich Salev is a heart that is open. How do you translate Tuv Levav?
Goodness of the heart.
What's Tuv and Levav? What's the noun? What's the adjective? It's whacked out.
Right.
Yeah. Tuv.
I mean, tuv is the noun.
Yeah. And Levav becomes an adjective. Isn't that crazy? What's that talking about? Your heart becomes what's describing Tov. Oh, it's on my other computer. I made a picture of this from the chatbot today. But what does that mean? What does that mean? That now your heart is describing good. First, your heart was blocked. Then your heart was broken. Then your heart was bitter. Now your heart's open. But now your heart is describing goodness. That's Hasidus. That's called Lishma. Why is it called Lishma? Why is it not called Lishmoi? For his sake. Why are you doing the mitzvah? You're doing it for God, yeah? You're doing it for him, yeah? Well, why'd you call it Lishma? That's feminine.
For the neshama? For the neshama? Neshama
You're
is...
doing it for your neshama? That's not very selfless. So the neshama wants to serve Hashem. I'm gonna be not 100% accurate here because we're talking about the lower levels of the neshama that if we're zoicha to, it wants to serve Hashem. You know why it wants to serve Hashem? Because it wants to come close to Hashem. It wants to do Ratzon Hashem. It wants to do mitzvahs because it wants to do Ratzon Hashem. That sounds very holy, yeah? Like halavai, we should be wanting to do mitzvahs because Hashem wants us to do mitzvahs more than reward and punish, all that kind of stuff, yeah? But that's not lishma. Wanting to do a mitzvah because that's Ratzon Hashem is a high level, but that's not what Hasidus is. That's not what Hasidus is interested in. We're going to explain, B'ezrat Hashem. You know the story that began the whole of Pneumius Torah? Who brought down Pneumius Torah for the world? You remember?
Shem Tov.
Yeah. You remember the story that began the whole thing? It's a story in Shabbos. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon were sitting there schmoozing, and I have it here. Yeah, Pasach Rabbi Yehuda, Ba'ama. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Come and not in ma'asehim shel umazoi. Look how lovely the actions of this nation, talking about Roma. Look how wonderful the things they're doing are. Tiknu shvakim, they made marketplaces. Tiknu gesharim, they made bridges. Tiknu machatzos, they made bathhouses." He's mosh geweldig. Yeah, Rabbi Yossi shasa. Rabbi Yossi was stum. Yeah. Listen to this. Nana Rabbi Shimon. These words that we're about to hear are everything. Nana Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai va'Omar. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai answered and said, Kol masha tiknu, everything that they would masakin. Loy tiknu ela l'tzorech atzmam. They didn't do it for anything other than themselves. Tiknu shvakin, they made marketplaces. Loishi ben zoinus, to put their zoinas. Yeah, machatzos l'adam behem atzman, to bathhouses to pleasure themselves. Yeah, gesharim, bridges, lito mehem meches, to take taxes. Like Yehuda ben Gerim, this guy called Yehuda ben Gerim, V'sipa divreihem, he told their v'nishmil malchus. He went and told this conversation to the authorities. Yeah, Amru, the authority says Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, Sheila, who was Meshabeach us, who praised us, Yisale, he's going to get praised. Yossi, Sheshosok, Rabbi Yossi, who didn't say anything, Yegala Tzipori, he's getting exiled to Tzipori. Shimon Shagina, Rabbi Shimon, who was Megane, who, how do you say that? Not disgraced them, insulted them. Yeah, Yehareg, he's to be killed. Ozul, who Ubrei, Rabbi Shimon and his son went. Tashu Bei Midrasha, they went and hid in the base Medrash. And then the story goes on that the wife was bringing them food and they were worried that they'd torture his wife and find out where they are. They went to the cave. And the famous story, they were in the cave for 12 years. They wrote the Zohar Kodesh and all the V'chule, and then they came out and they burned people out, whatever. And then they went back for another year. You realize, and that was the whole Pneumius Torah came from that little story. So really, the whole Pneumius Torah comes from two words. It comes from a hakpada, a intolerance for these two words, l'tzorech atzman, for their own sake. From that word, from those two words, from Rabbi Shimon's intolerance of doing things for ourselves, of anyone doing something for themselves, the whole thing, the whole Zohar came, and then the Arizal came, and then the Baal Shem Tov came, and the whole that was the beginning of the whole thing. That's really the shoresh, the foundation of the whole game we're playing, is an intolerance for l'tzorech atzman, for self-service. Now, that's really what the Tuv Levav is talking about. The highest level, which is the fifth level, by the way, that's Mashiach. Mashiach is Oisius Chamesh, yeah? The fifth level. That's why they call it the quintessential. You've heard that term, the quintessential, so-and-so? The quintessence. So quint is 5. It's from the Greeks. They had the same idea. The fifth level is the highest level. That's why Tuv Levav is the fifth level. That's the level of Yechida, the highest that we spoke about before. Remember, we have behavior, then we have emotions, then we have intellect, then we have will, then we have pleasure. Yeah, remember we've spoken about that? The highest level, pleasure, that's the Yechida. It's all the same thing. That's Mashiach, that's Chamesh. And that's Tuv Levav, where you become the adjective. You become just a portal. You become a window for the Rebbeinu Shalom to come into his world. And that window is incredibly unique, beautifully unique. inspirationally unique. That's your personality, and that's your money and your house and your kids and your education and your physiology and all of that. That's just the shape of the window, so to speak. And that has to be exactly the right shape, exactly how it needs to be. You're not denouncing an ounce of your individuality, not a milligram of your individuality. It's just that's what becomes the shame, so to speak. That's the adjective of what's flowing through, which is the Rabbanu Sholem. That's really Hasidus. Now, we could talk about this there's so much to talk about, but I want to just get to a very important point. Okay, we're going to miss like half of the share that I planned, but okay. What was the Baal Shem Tov's fascination with the simple folk? You've heard this before, yeah? Him, Reb Nachman, all the big tzaddikim, it seems that they were like much more fond of like the very simple Pashat Yidden than all the big Talmidei Chachamim and tzaddikim. You've heard that before? No? It's Yedua. It's Yedua. It's what's Pshat? What's that about? So I'll tell you, when I go to England, I was just in England a couple of weeks ago, and where I grew up, I'm Balchura, so I grew up in a completely like secular place. And when I go back to England, my dad like goes to shul on on Shabbos, and like he's part of the community, but it's not like l'chachila halachic Yiddishkeit, yeah. But it's a United Synagogue shul. It's different. Like in America, if they're not from, it's like they're already like it's like the form like completely gone. But in England, it's different, where like they're l'chachila shuls, but no one's Shomer Shabbos. Like just the rabbi is Shomer Shabbos, but you could go and daven there without a problem. It's, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, they have this thing on a Sunday morning where they daven shachris with tefillin. They don't daven any other. They hit that Sunday morning in Shenley. They get together between 12 and 15 men, and maybe one or two of them are Shomer Shabbos, but they get together and they put on tefillin, and they daven shachris. And it's mamash a joke. You'll see it, yeah? The guys, tefillin's over here. He forgot to put on his arm tefillin. It's like, it's so funny. And when I went there the first time, I was like, kind of, imagine how you'd be, Nebuch, look at these, yeah. And then I started to realize something very deep. And I remembered a story from my Rebbe that's a very special story that I'll tell you right now. That he said during COVID, I can't remember, first, second year, it was a lockdown, yeah, over Pesach time. I hope it was the second year, I don't know. And a guy in New York called my Rebbe, told him this story afterwards, that he was milling around the house, and it was coming to evening time, completely secular guy. And he bumped into a calendar, or so, I don't know how, yeah, but he saw that tonight was Leil Seder, Pesach. Tonight was Pesach, completely secular. And he just it came over him like, got to do something. Like his family's away, he can't go anywhere, he's locked down, he's got no matzah, house full of chometz, but you can't not do something on Leil Seder. So he told my Rebbe that he basically went to the cupboard, like plutzing for some matzah, couldn't find any matzah. He found three rice bread crackers, yeah. And he said, like from a distance, it looked a bit more like matzah than bread, yeah. So he took out 3 rice cakes, yeah, and he found an old Haggadah, an old bottle of probably treif wine, and he did the 4 cups, and he made a Seder. And he said to my Rebbe that he felt that someone was mamash listening. He said it was very strange because he felt that someone was listening to the Seder. And my Rebbe, this is even a bit that I said I was going to cry about. My Rebbe said that was for sure the most heilige Seder of in the world on that year. Why? Because it was the Jewishness in a person wanting to express itself. And then I realized that this minyan, wow, I was like, wow, this is amazing. These men are not religious people, bichlal. What are you doing putting on tefillin on a Sunday morning at 7:30? Why aren't you in bed with everybody else? It's cold. It's horrible. Why are you in shul with tefillin? You don't even know what you're doing. You can't read the siddur. What are you doing? You hear what's going on there? That's Yiddishkeit. That's a neshama mamash. That's a Shem expressing himself through a person. That's not a religious person. So I said it when I finished, when I cut this, and I immediately was humbled from being like Paro to being like Moshe. I was being so arrogant, thinking, look at these idiots, to being in awe of the Shechina Kedosha Mamash. So when we sat down and they had the bagels and stuff afterwards, I said this to them, and I said, look, there's no kun. I daven. I'm religious. Religious people daven. Yeah, that's what we do. That's what religious people do. But you guys aren't religious. So you're really seeing the Ribbono Shel Olam shining through you, because you've got no reason to be doing it otherwise. It's not coming from any kind of reason. In fact, you could probably give me 20 reasons why you shouldn't be doing this. So just the irony is that was 2 weeks ago, then not this Shabbos, but the Shabbos before that. I don't know why. I usually spend shashus in my house. Just out of nowhere, it popped into my head. I'm gonna go to I live in the middle of Jerusalem with all the big, with all the big boys, all the tzaddikim and the big chassiduses and the big Ovdei Hashem. And I decided I was just going to go to a big place in Jerusalem that's big avodas Hashem, screaming, and 20, like a 6-hour shachris on Shabbos, and big avodas, and I don't know what, and I went there. And the week before I was in Shenli, where my parents were, in this minyan with like 13 irreligious Jews with tefillin all over the place, and and I felt it was much holier in Shenli because people weren't trying to be religious. In fact, the opposite. They didn't want to be religious at all. They weren't religious, and they were putting on tefillin, and they were praying, and they were saying Kriya Shema. And in this place that I was at, I'm not judging people and whatever, but it's so much harder to be real when you're trying to play the part of the frum Jew. You know what I'm saying? It gets in the way. It really gets in the way. So this really, what I'm going to tell you now, this is really what Hasidus really is. How long have you guys been married?
Almost 20 years.
Almost 15 years.
I'm almost 20 years well. When's your anniversary?
Zayin Adar.
Oh, just now. You're going to have your 20th anniversary in a few.
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay, so we're Yud Zayin Sivan. So basically the same thing. Anyway, but 15 years old. I'm right now. I think after being married for 20 years, I think that I have an inkling, a teeny inkling into what it might mean to be married 60 years. A teeny inkling, yeah? No, after being married 10 years, no clue. 5 years, definitely not. But now after 20 years, I think, and especially hearing my Rebbe speak about it a lot, yeah? So listen to this. You see an old couple sitting there. He's reading the paper, she's knitting. They've been married 60 years. There's no fireworks. There's probably no physical relationship left as well, and they don't need to make conversation with each other. They're beyond everything. You with me? they're mamash one. They're mamash one. They can sit there, one of them can read the paper, one of them can do the knitting, but they're mamash one. We're right now, we're still in the thick of the relationship. So we're building the relationship, and there's the physical aspect, and then there's the talking and the smoothing things out and the getting through the issues and the compromising and the giving and you know, we're still in the throes of the relationship, yeah? But when you get to that age, if you're Zoicha, after being married for 60 years, you've gone beyond everything. There's no experience even. It's gone so beyond experience. There's no like passionate, do you know what I'm saying? It's not like the passionate love of a young couple or anything like that. It's so much holier than that. It's so much more real than that. You with me? You can just imagine, like, we can't leave. That's what I'm saying. You can have an inkling of an, you know, 20 years is a long time, 15 years also a long time. You can have an inkling. Do you understand what I'm saying? But we don't know what it really is. But there's one thing for sure. It's completely beyond experience. It's not an experience. You can't describe to somebody your relationship with your wife of 60 or your husband of 60 years is. You can't describe that to someone. It's like, you know, I don't know if we mentioned this before, but when you sit there, I've come in many times with my wife, sitting there on the couch with one of our kids sitting there reading a book, yeah? You've had the experience many times, yeah? You're sitting there, it's warm, there's no distractions, just you and one of the kids or two of the kids, and you sit there with the book, they're within your arms, they're mummish in you, yeah? And you turn around to the kid, yeah, and you're like, Shami, tell me, what does that feel like? Well, what does it feel like? No, just leave me alone. I'm enjoying my time. I'm with mummy. Leave me alone. What do you want? If you pulled mummy away at that point, the kid would scream. But the relation, the connection is so much deeper than any kind of experience. It's a real oneness. It's a real oneness. That's what the Baal Shem Tov brought to the world. That's what opened up. Our relationship has matured. We're not like, do you remember we spoke about those ants last week, a couple of weeks ago, about those termites that make that tremendous thing? So one of the things I don't think I did mention is that to build those buildings takes like about 5 or 6 years, yeah? Each termite only lives about 30 days. So not only do the termites operate as one organism right now, like how we can relate to every Jew, like, you know, I'm an eye, you're a nose, he's a brain, she's a heart, she's a toe, he's a finger. We can imagine that as every Jew, yeah? But also time-wise, we're one. Lahavdil, the termites are operating not just as one right now with the 1.5 million termites, but one over time with the few 100 million termites over the period of however many years. That's Am Yisrael as well. We're not just one as a nation right now. We're one as a nation right now, coupled with as a nation as we were. So Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are still alive in us. It's like, well, where are you when you were 5 years old? You're still here. There's the 5-year-old somewhere in there. It's matured and developed, etc. It's not like it's not there. You're part of who you are is what you were when you were 5, etc. Part of who you are is what you were when you were 15, when you were 30. So we are now at the end of the relationship. We've gone through all of the madregas with the Rabbeinu Shloim. And that's what it means, lishma. Lishma means transcending the level of the neshama, or at least the created levels of the neshama, really attaching yourself to essence of the neshama. Lishma is feminine, yeah? Which means for the sake of the mitzvah. You with me? Not for God's sake, for the sake of the mitzvah. The neshama does the mitzvah because it's Ratzon Hashem. So whose is the mitzvah? It's God's. Why are you doing it? Because he wants that. Lishma is when you've transcended that level and you've become one with Ribono Shel Olam to the point where the mitzvah, you're actually doing it l'shem mitzvah. Like the Ribono Shel Olam doesn't want it because it's his ratzon. He wants the mitzvah. That's what's available to us now. I mean, I could talk about this for a lot longer, but the lowliness of our situation, the fact that we can't muster up any Ava in Yira, the fact that Gashmias is so appealing nowadays, more than it ever was, the fact that there's so much confusion and so many other things pulling us this way and that way and v'chule, all of that is part of the package that allows us now to do the mitzvah, l'shem mitzvah. So I'll finish very quickly. We have another 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Very
can I ask a
quickly.
question?
Sorry?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
Okay. Just back to
Turn your camera on or not?
sorry.
You want to turn on your camera? Don't have to.
How do I do it? I don't mind. I'm just not so familiar here.
Little click on the
Maybe
left.
this?
There you go.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
Am I being heard?
Yeah.
Okay. No, just back to what you said before. I mean, it was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I thank my sister for schlepping me onto this.
Who's
I
your
just have time today, Mrs.
Yeah,
Silver.
we're sisters.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Okay. So just back to what you said before about the marriage piece with a spark, it was beautiful, and I really appreciated that piece.
The marriage piece with the spark, what'd you say?
You said that the older couple, you don't have to see that spark and
Oh,
that like,
yeah.
excitement
Yeah.
because they already transcended that, and it's so holy. You know, today's days, so many times we see people that want to talk about marriage or courses and all these kind of things, and so many times they advertise and they express themselves like, keep the spark alive, or how to keep the spark alive. And I always wonder about that. Is it a secular phenomena that this like spark, that like that newness, that like high level of excitement, rather than the familiarity that we have, and that the oneness rather than the spark? Is it like a secular notion to advertise, or like even the thought of like, I don't have that spark anymore. How do I run after that?
You were here at the beginning. We spoke about etzem and shame.
Yes,
Essence and name.
right.
That's it. That's the idea.
Mhm.
The essence is beyond all experience. The essence is so much more holy than experience. But there's a lot to shame. There's a lot to name. That's important. So there is that, and the way we get to essence is through name. So keeping a spark alive, it depends on which context you're talking about, yeah. But definitely in where we're holding in our, you know, when we're not old, we're not an old couple right now. There does need to be that the externality as well. There does, but it's not. And it depends on everybody. But that's not really what marriage is about. Really, marriage is about the merging of two into one. And that's beyond all experience. And it's annoying for us because, you know, it says Rahmana Liba boy, yeah? Hashem wants the heart. So what people think that means is that it means you have to be like, you know, put all your energy into the mitzvahs, yeah? That's all it means. Some people are like some people like that. Yeah, and other people are much more regua, much more chilled out, and you see that in work. You see like lahavdil, like, you know, you've got people like Elon Musk and you know, like these big businessmen who like work, you know, 22 hours a day and sleep 2 hours, and they're like this the whole time, yeah. And you've got like people like Jeff Bezos, lahavdil, who like they sleep 8 hours a night and they take it very easy and everything's, you know, and it just kind of worked out the way it worked out. And you've got these different temperaments, yeah? So when it means Rahmana Liba boy, it means Hashem wants you. And what people think is, well, I have to be like this. If I'm not like, because that looks the part, you understand? But that you have to be you. So some people are just very easygoing, and by some people, there's no sparks, there's no fire in their life. They're very water people. And then you've got other people who are like passionate and like that, yeah. So the problem is that we think that we need to be these passionate like that kind of people, where maybe you're a very fluid, you know, easygoing water person, and that isn't for you. So that's, I think, that idea of the spark, that could be so different by different relationships. If you and your husband are very kind of water people, that's going to look very different to if you and your husband are very kind of fire people. It's just going to look very different. But all of that is just the externals. The marriage is really the merging of the essence of the two of you. And that doesn't mean that the old couple can't sit there and, you know, look into each other's eyes and go, oh, I love you so much, you're gorgeous, or hold hands. And it doesn't mean they can't do that. But you hear the point. The point
Yeah,
we're trying to
thank
get.
you.
That's where we're with now with Rabbeinu Shalom. That's what's available to us. That's the avoider available to us. So I'm going to just finish on this very, very holy story. I haven't got time, but I'm going to do this anyway. That this in Parshas Baloscha, when Aaron a Kohen goes in to light the menorah, yeah, and it says Vayaschein Aaron. The pasuk says, and Aaron did so, and Rashi says that he was no lo shina halacha. He didn't deviate from the halacha. And that was the shevach of Aaron. The praise of Aaron was that he didn't deviate from the malacha, from the halacha. You're like, what? Aaron, he did, oh great. He lit Shabbos candles, you know, pardon me, he lit them on time. He didn't light them after Shkia. That's the shevach of Aaron Cohen. Yeah. He lit 2 candles and not 1 candle. Like, why is that the shevach? Why is that the praise of Aaron, that he didn't deviate from the halacha? You hear the question? So imagine there's a tzaddik who lives near where I live, called Rav Shimon Zilberberg, yeah? If you ever see him, I mean, I've seen him on Hoshana Rabbah, Sheikh Lulav Nesok, yeah? He comes out after we waited for hours. He comes out covered in talus with his Lulav Nesok. So you just see hands with Lulav Nesok and just covered with a talus. He's just standing there. You start to hear like sobbing, deep sobbing. You don't know where to put yourself because it's real. You have no idea what to do. And then you just start seeing tears drip, like a pool of tears just dripping. And you see that his talus is stuck to his head from sweat. And it's just like you're looking at the most intimate. You don't even want to look. It's so intimate. Yeah. Thank God he's got his talus covered over his head. And then he breaks the lulav. Literally, he breaks the lulav. They have to give him a new lulav each direction. Yeah. I never saw him, but people say by the end of Rosh Hashanah, he's just on the floor, like convulsing, sweated all the way through. Yeah. Imagine he had to light the menorah in the Kodesh. He had to go into the base of Mikdash and light the menorah. Imagine what that would look like. It would be carnage. There'd be like broken glass and oil everywhere. He'd be like on the corner on fire, like shaking with the menorah on the floor, like, you know, blood and fire and water and shemen. Yeah. You think Aaron Cohen had any less emotional intensity than Suma Zilberberg? So this is what the Lubavitch Rebbe said, that this mitzvah was the only mitzvah that he could think of where it could have been that your emotional relationship to the mitzvah would stare the Maisa mitzvah. Because the mitzvah of the menorah was such a fine, you had to do the psilas perfectly, everything very like fine motor, can't think of the word, what's the word? Like very precise, precision kind of avoiders, yeah? And he's like burning with fire, with love and fear of God, yeah? You try and do that when you're like burning with fire, yeah? That was the shevach of Aaron Cohen. That in this very bizarre scenario, where his ava and yira, his love and fear, would have messed up the actual mitzvah, he was able to put the ava and the yira to the side and just do the Maisa mitzvah, exactly how it was meant to be done. That was the shevach of Aaron Cohen. So that sounds very nice. But what about me? I've got no ava, I've got no yira. What am I putting to the side? Yeah, it's like a nice vote for Aaron. So the thought is that you're right. we hardly have any Ava in Yira. And if we do have any Ava in Yira, it's definitely not enough to share the mitzvah. Definitely not. It only enhances the mitzvah. But we have all these other things that we can put to the side. Ulterior motives. Forget Olam Haba and Gehenna. Forget all that stuff. But what about I want to be close to God, or I want to have meaning in my life. I want to have spirituality. All of these other things, yeah, those you can put to the side, and you can just do the Maisa Mitzvah. That's the Bechina of Aaron HaKohen. That's the avodah of the Tzaddik Gamor, of the Bnei Eliah. That is the avodah of the Chassid. Not that you would be serving Hashem without Ava and Yira, but in our generation where there's hardly any Ava and Yira left, if we can just put the stuff to the side like those Jews in Shemli with the tefillin all over the place, and that man in New York with the rice bread for the Seder, yeah, that's mamash the relationship. That's the old couple sitting there. There's no fanfare, there's no fireworks, there's no experience. There's just the oneness, mamash. That's where we're holding. Bezrat Hashem. We should be zoicha. That doesn't mean that we don't serve Hashem with Ava and Yira, but that just means that in the 95% of the times when we don't have any Ava and Yira, remember that Hashem has manufactured it to be that way, that you're not chasa, you're now zoichet to essence mamash, that the Rabbeinu Shalom can do a mitzvah through you mamash, and you're doing it for the Shem mitzvah, and then you become that's a revelation of our unity now with Rabbeinu Shalom. We're in a very, very, very special tekufa of reality right now. We're right at the end of the whole picture. And we're like that elderly couple with Rabbeinu Shalom. Like we said, that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you can't hold hands and look into each other's eyes. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means that the oneness is still there, even if you're reading the paper and she's doing the sewing or the knitting. It's still there. Bezrat Hashem. We should be zocher to real Hasidus. Bezrat Hashem.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So everyone's like,
Thank you.
Bezrat.